Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Grapevine Wellness Show. I'm your host, Jillian Armstrong, and I'm so glad you're here today. For those of you who are new here, I'll tell you a little bit about me before we get started. I specialize in trauma recovery and prevention, as well as grief recovery and the anxiety and depression that often accompany both of those things. I also help couples navigate their relationships, especially where trauma or grief might impact the relationship. Basically, I help people navigate the most difficult times in their lives and avoid emotional trauma through those difficult times. None of us want to have our lives disrupted, but all of us at one time or another do. And so having a specialist help guide you through those times always makes it better. So if you or a loved one have had to navigate one of those times without support and you find yourself struggling to recover, please do reach out. There's hope for you. So that's a little bit about me, a bit about the show. I'll share now. Our mission on this show is to bring our viewers meaningful conversations that offer hope and support and practical tools for navigating life's challenges, and also to highlight the beautiful people in Reno who are serving our community, and which makes me think about today's episode and just how special this particular episode feels for me for lots of reasons. I'm truly honored to have a conversation with our guest tonight. And the best part, those watching live can interact with our guest and ask him questions after our interview. So be sure to stick around for that. If questions or comments come up during our interview, you can definitely put them in the Q&A box, and I will make sure to address those before we end our conversation tonight. So now I'm honored to introduce Chaplain Chaz Blackburn, who is an ordained senior chaplain with the IFOC and received his critical incident and stress management certification through the University of Maryland, Baltimore County Department of Emergency Health Services. Yes, that's a mouthful. Yeah. Yes, and there's a lot more. Hold up, buckle in. Chaz is also a licensed spiritual care and grief support chaplain, as well as the director of volunteer services for Circle of Life Hospice here in Reno. He serves various local nonprofit boards, committees, and task forces. Way too many to name here, but we're going to get into them as well during our conversation. Chaz also co-hosts the weekly video Community Cares podcast and YouTube's Coffee with a Chaplain, which I can't wait for the next episode of that. He serves as one of the founders and the assistant corps commander of the IFOC Great Basin Chaplain Corps. Chaz currently leads almost 60 GBCC crisis response chaplains and provides chaplaincy and to displaced populations, fire departments, hospitals, CISM, EMS, law enforcement, and more. He's also a Nevada Donor Network advocate for Life Volunteer. Most importantly, really, besides his faith in Jesus, he is an extremely proud single dad of his precious daughter, Lily. Chaplain Chaz, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Hey, thank you. It's such an honor, and you're too kind. We had you on the Communities Cares podcast, and
Yeah.
I think that we really connected with our hearts to just serve those who are in grief and in crisis and struggling with trauma effects. But what an opportunity to be able to just kind of deep dive on really what it's about, which is those that we're serving and the men and women that I get to serve alongside that are doing incredible work.
Yes, absolutely. And as always, the humble Chaplain Chaz, right? Turning that back around. But tonight I really am very interested in the man behind that long introduction and all of the work that you do as well. So it may be kicking and screaming, but I'd love to I'd love to pull some personal things out of you about your life and who you are as a human being as well. Is that all right with you?
It is for your show only.
Okay, all right. I promise, just between us. So let's if we could go back prior to chaplaincy, prior to all the work that you're doing here. You used to work in the corporate world, and I think you were doing quite well there. tell me a little bit about that life. What Chaplain Chaz was like back then, and what was missing in that part of your life.
Well, to be truthful with you, back then I was pretty selfish. I'm just going to be really transparent. My priorities were not straight. I was really seeking just success and money. And so I climbed the corporate ladder. I actually worked for Samsung Telecommunications America, STA, for a three-state territory. We actually were number one in the country for 2 years in a row for sales over our goals and performance. And I held various positions, including general manager of operations and finance for a TWI, which was a DBA of Boost Mobile, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it just wasn't fulfilling. I was always trying to get to the next title, the next role. I was always trying to make more money or get more success as I defined it at that time. But there were huge holes in my heart, and it was not rewarding. It wasn't filling. I wasn't happy with myself at the end of the day. And when I put my head on my pillow, I really started to think, does any of this matter? What's the point?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. When you put your head on the pillow, that's when you start thinking. And there was something missing. What did it take to realize what that something was?
Well, I was traveling, I mean, an
Eh,
astronomically large amount. It was really excessive, and I had a dual residence in Roseville, California at the time, because my offices were based out of there, and so I ended up moving back. I did hold one or two positions after that here in the corporate world. However, the reason I moved back was to be more of a full-time dad, and I ended up becoming a situation where I did have Lily full time, which is, I wouldn't change it for anything. I mean, it's the greatest honor of my life. And like I said, and sent to you, as far as, my faith, the next thing that's most important to me besides chaplaincy after that is being a father. And just, I think some of the greatest contributions we can make to society that I truly understand now is raising our kids and loving them to love other people. So that was the straw that kind of got me back into Reno
yeah.
full time. And then, yeah, and then some other things transpired.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I am so like selfishly glad that you're back in Reno for
Me
sure.
as well.
And I was able to meet you here. Tell me, you've shared that volunteering at a place called the Winter Tent in Reno was a turning point. What happened there? Tell me about the Winter Tent.
Sure. So I really, again, I started like having those holes in my heart, and I was really trying to find purpose besides being a father. And I just wanted to do something to give back. And something that I've always had a heart for is displaced populations. You know, you really see what love is, helping someone who can never repay you, right? And being there and seeing the gratitude in some of these folks, it really blows my mind. Like, for instance, sometimes when we hand out, food or gift cards, sometimes they go immediately and share that with the other person that's displaced with them, who they're not even with. I mean, they're some of the most giving people sometimes. Yes, they have addictions and different issues. So long story short, we had something called the Winter Tent, which was the old homeless shelter off of Record Street. And there were many homeless people who were dying in the cold because the shelter was full. So the city of Reno, and I think it was Mayor Hillary at the time, created a solution to be able to have these giant pop-up tents next to the shelter. And there would be heaters that would be funneling in heat, and there would be these metal bunk beds. And we would pile in probably 80 to 100 people in there, but at least they would get out of the cold and have a place to stay at night. There was a lot of bed bugs, a lot of fights, a lot of issues. Obviously, it wasn't well regulated because it was just, they were tents. But I started donating my time there, and it really blew my mind just how much we have to be grateful for despite all of our trials. You really want to have a new lease on life, go spend some time down there with some of those individuals that truly physically have nothing, or in extremely poor health, and can't take a shower when they would like to, or have somewhere to go to the bathroom. It's a whole different lifestyle, and I'm not being judgmental. It's the facts. And so I started donating my time there, and during that time, my father had become a hospice chaplain, and I saw just a turning point, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But he was so fulfilled with what he was doing in his calling, and he said to me, Chaz, you might consider becoming a chaplain. And I was like, what is a chaplain? I didn't
Yeah.
even know. time. I had my faith that I was seeking, but I didn't know what a chaplain was.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's dive into that. First let's talk about your dad a little bit and his influence on you. And yeah, what he saw in you, all of those things that made you consider this path, and then we'll touch on what exactly is chaplaincy after that.
Well, I was still working in the corporate world, but donating some time at the winter tent. And I think he saw, that I didn't have that fulfillment. I was voicing that I just didn't feel like I was doing enough. I wasn't where I was supposed to be in life. And he's got such a giving heart, and the way that I learned from the best when it comes to chaplaincy. I mean, truly, to have him as my mentor in the chaplaincy field was incredible. And it's really a beautiful story of reconciliation because my family went through some things when I was younger, and I actually didn't have a relationship with my dad for 9 years.
Oh.
And through this process, before the process, but also through this process, we have an incredible relationship now. And then my mom and my dad are separated, but my mom also equally supported me in this role of becoming a chaplain. I think they both knew. They would always tell me, and I don't feel this way, but they would say you were destined for great things, and just pumped a lot of encouragement that you have purpose to help other people in life. And I never could find that. And then I learned about chaplaincy. I actually went to the base academy for IFOC here. They had a class of about 35 chaplains at the First Responder Regional Training Center off of Par Boulevard. And I had to make a really tough choice because I had no PTO at that time. And being a single dad, I had a lot of bills. But the first initial week training, you have to do that to even look at licensing or continue on training and serving. And so my boss said, well, you can't take it. You don't have PTO. And I just prayed, and I went back to him and I said, I know I'm supposed to do this. And if you have to fire me, I'm going to take this leap of faith and do it. And so he ended up letting me take that time off. But it was scary. I'm not going to lie. It was truly a humbling experience and surrendering. And so I went to that base training, and I sat next to Chaplain Carl and Chaplain Terry. And then Chaplain Misty hosted it. And there's 35 chaplains in this organization that are doing this basic training. The Great Basin Chaplain Corps had not been established yet. This was in 2019. And out of that 35, only about probably a third of them ended up becoming licensed, and only 4 of them wanted to create a corps. And so they were really truly the founders. And eventually, I decided to go ahead and that we wanted to make a corps. And so I had reached out to IFOC headquarters because they have corps all around the country. There's 33 of them, I think, now. And so they serve their communities. There's a, not military, but a command structure for accountability because you're working with first responders, hospitals, and you're in real crisis situations and need to ensure that people are well equipped and trained and serving in the appropriate fields and have the right protection in place. And so I joined, and we decided that we wanted to create the Great Basin Chaplain Corps. So I started off as the Corps training officer. And then I got promoted to the community service coordinator, which leads all of our specialty teams like law enforcement, fire, EMS, hospitals. And then in 2020, we finally got all the paperwork aligned, and we actually were able to file and establish the Corps. And there was only 4 or 5 of us, maybe 5 of us at that time. And we saw a huge need during COVID. Obviously, people were dying and watching their loved ones die on tablets. Renown hospital had a cut to their chaplaincy program by almost 90%. People were dying without emotional support or spiritual care from a licensed chaplain. And so we saw a need to step up for our community and answer these calls that were not being taken because there was no funding. And so we are a 100% volunteer organization, though we are well equipped and trained and licensed and insured for liability, and do a pretty rigorous process of background checks and going through these different training programs. And so anyways, the rest is history, but we now have almost 30 specialty teams that are being developed. We have chaplains that are serving on multiple teams, but we have 60 licensed chaplains in the Great Basin Chaplain Corps that serves Northern Nevada. And during this time, right before we actually became a licensed corps, At the end of in September of 2019, I being a new chaplain, I wanted to serve in multiple areas. And so I went to volunteer where my dad was a hospice chaplain, Circle of Life Hospice.
Mm.
And I became a volunteer. And right before I got my first patient, my grandma, Judy, who actually died in this room on hospice, right where I'm sitting, she got liver cancer and had less than a month and a half to live. And actually, that was in July. I apologize. She passed away later that month. It all kind of blurs together with grief, as you know, the timelines. But it was a tough but beautiful time in my life. But anyway, so she actually ended up being my first patient as a volunteer with Circle Life Hospice. They allowed me to take her on as not only as a family member, but also to be a volunteer. And I got to watch all of the disciplines come into this room, this house, social work, chaplaincy, CNAs, nurses, the different, just even the volunteers and the people that you would call and speak on the phone with at the office. They were also loving, and the administrator, who's now the owner and CEO and administrator, Michelle Cagle. There was this. She had a lot of fluid buildup, almost 17 pounds. And typically they don't drain that once you're on hospice. But for her, for whatever reason, she wanted that drain to be able to be in comfort the last few weeks of her life. So Michelle paid for that out of the Circle Life Hospice's pocket. And she just showed so much kindness and went above and beyond. They all did, the entire team. And I was like, this is amazing to be able to support people through some of the most difficult days of their life and through end of life and help them to find meaning in their lives and to just be present. I walked in one day and my grandma was crying. And my grandma had a sick sense of humor. I might tear up and laugh all at the same time. But she looks at me with these tears in her eyes and I said, "What's wrong, Grandma?" Which is a silly thing probably to ask someone who's dying.
Who's on
And she
hospice?
said, I just had to sign up for hospice, Chaz, real serious. I was like, "Oh my goodness, Grandma, I'm so sorry. That was so insensitive. I didn't mean it." And she starts laughing with these happy tears in her eyes. And she looks at me and she reaches out to me and hugs me and says, "Chaz, I know I'm so proud of you for becoming a chaplain. And I know that you're going to serve people for the rest of your life. And you're going to be serving many people in hospice and just loving them. And I'm so honored to be your first patient." And that to me was like, whoa, the walls came down and I knew I had found my calling. A job is a job that you get paid at. But when you can find something that you love and get paid for it,
Yep.
that is a calling. And that gets you through the rough spots, the meaning of that.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, about 3 months later, or maybe 2 months, it's hard to remember, but Michelle, the administrator, decided to hire me full time. And it was so funny because I'd been working as a manager for Staples before that. That was the last corporate role I had, and I was so unhappy. And I would be providing support and care to some of the homeless, displaced individuals that would come up right in front of that Staples. And I just wanted to be a chaplain so bad, and I saw how fulfilled my dad was. And then when I got the opportunity, I knew it was right, and I was all in after that. And so later in 2020, I was working for Circle Life Hospice, and that's when I reached out and they said, "Actually, we have 4 chaplains who are interested in starting the Corps. You would be the 5th because you need 5 for the command staff." And so we filed and we got all our ducks in a row, went through all the leadership core training courses and made sure that we could start equipping people to start building this. And now we have over 60 licensed chaplains. We need probably 150 to 250 to meet the current need of calls. We have a 24/7 dispatch line. We're at 6 local hospitals, and we're at law enforcement agencies where we do CISMs or critical incident stress management. We work with Nevada Peer Support Network, which is a peer support for all the agencies and healthcare workers. And, it's just an incredible need in our community. I mean, 80%, studies show that 80%, and not a specific faith, but 80% of people during a time of crisis would welcome some form of faith that's relative to them. And so when we talk about being inclusive in care, that includes ensuring that they have access to faith crisis intervention support. And so I know you probably want to ask me, what is a chaplain, right?
I have so many questions, so
Okay.
many, but yes, let's talk about exactly what that is for those who are unfamiliar.
because a lot of people ask, like, are you a chap or a pastor, right? And
Yeah,
so
what's the difference?
what's the difference, right? So obviously we do what we do because of our faith. There's no doubt that's what drives us.
Mhm.
But chaplaincy, just like in the military, is actually protected under multiple Supreme Court cases, like Lemon versus Kurtz in 1970. And as long as you're meeting two of three critical needs that are practical in the secular sense, then you are allowed to operate when requested upon. And so essentially, a chaplain is, we never evangelize. That's not our role. It's a ministry of presence. And so we are there to provide emotional support. We're trained in crisis intervention, emotional first aid, grief support. And I like to call us the emotional and spiritual paramedics. So, like when you get shot, a paramedic shows up to stop the immediate wound and then passes you off to more trained professionals who are going to do the surgeries, and the nurses in the ER are going to button you up, and then you're going to have that surgeon come in and fix you up and try to save your life. Well, we do the same thing. We are there for them during crisis, and then we refer them out and build a bridge to their faith leaders and their mental health resources, their psychosocial resources and social services resources, and get them plugged in with a support team. And the neat thing is we get to walk alongside them. We get to provide grief support. We have all this different knowledge for these secular roles, and we're really there just to come alongside them and listen. Another fun fact about chaplaincy is because we are considered clergy, though we don't evangelize, we are protected under different state codes, but specifically in Nevada NRS code, which allows us confidentiality to the highest level. And so a lot of first responders trust us because it's protected under law. We will not talk to their rank or their command about what they're sharing with us. Though we are mandated reporters for what we see outside of those one-on-one or one-on-two counseling sessions. So if we see child abuse or domestic abuse, of course, we're going to report it. The one exception to confidentiality is that if they're suicidal and showing strong suicidal ideations, and we do a suicide analysis and they are not showing any baseline living ideations that this person's going to hurt themselves, then we do have to get them help and report that. But outside of that, in that one-on-one or one-on-two setting, it's completely protected. And that gives people a safe space to really get off their chest all the dark things that they don't want to tell anybody. And by doing that, a lot of times they think clearer, and we're able to introduce resources, and with the ultimate goal to get them the help that they need.
Yeah.
And so, some people will trust a chaplain and not a therapist. Some people will trust a therapist, not a chaplain. And so when we talk about peer support in agencies and the hospitals and hospices, that's critical that we all work as a team. We're just another layer of support to envelope them and just support them.
Wow, I love that. And you're right. Talking to a chaplain is very, very, has a different feel than talking to a therapist, and probably a lot less stigma, especially in like the EMS field and the police force and all of that. So, oh, that's amazing. And thanks for that.
Yeah,
Um,
and trying to be
explanation.
culturally competent too. Our teams are specialized in an area. So our fire chaplains, they're typically either former firefighters or part of the fire community and fire family. They know the culture, and so they're able to relate more to whatever demographic that they're serving.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you said you used a phrase a minute ago that maybe we can dive down into a little bit more, the ministry of present. I
Hmm.
love that. I love that. Talk about that a little bit more.
So absolutely, yeah. Ministry of presence. You can be present physically and not truly be present. It is it is hard, as you know, because of your profession, to be a active listener, to
Mm,
truly be present.
yeah.
There's something about the Greek word for compassion, which actually means to take the person's pain and to envelop it within ourselves so that we can share their pain with them. And so being present with somebody is truly taking in and caring and active listening and just being present, not trying to fix it. That is absolutely not our role. We can't fix it. People have to fix it themselves. We can love them and give them resources, but really, we're just there to be present and let them know that they're not alone. And there is so much power in that human connection. Two things that kind of come to mind for that. Um, I'm just trying to think of, an example, I guess. There was this individual that was on hospice, and this individual didn't really want to talk to me as a chaplain. I didn't think this individual wanted me to, be working with him. And I'll never forget this. It was so powerful. This individual didn't have a lot of family, but he was very well known in town, had a lot of friends. But what really matters at the end, living the nightlife and having friends, what are true friends? What are, those family relationships?
Yeah.
And so I'll never forget. I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and leave now unless you need anything. And he yells at me, he says, stop. I was really taken off guard. He said, I am so scared of dying in my room while I take a nap. Will you please just sit out in the living room? Though I don't want to talk to you, I just want to know somebody is out there. So if I die, I know I'll be found. And I was dumbfounded by that. And so he didn't end up dying during his nap, but he took a nap in his bedroom.
Yeah.
And I sat in the living room for, I don't know, an hour or two and let him nap. When he woke up, he was so refreshed. But that taught me an important lesson that sometimes truly just literally being physically present and caring, even if you're not saying a word, there is so much power because regardless of your faith background, we are spiritual beings. I think most everybody can admit that there is a spirit within us as far as that we have to nurture our spirit, whatever that means to you. And so that taught me an important lesson about the ministry of presence. And the one other time I think I can think of is I responded to one of the worst calls in my career, and it was in the ICU. And this individual had been crying for over 24 hours, not sleeping, had just witnessed another loved one murder another loved one in front of them, and tried to give this individual CPR for 20 minutes, and the police couldn't assist because they didn't know where this other individual was, and just really a horrific situation. And she had been stabbed as well. And I'll never forget, so we have a policy, new rookie chaplains can't take calls by themselves until they've had time of probation for their safety and for the safety of those we serve and just for the quality as well. And so this one chaplain, she said, can I shadow you? And I won't say her by name. And I said, well, okay, this is going to be an amazing first call, and so she joined me, but we both just sat with this person. We just sat there, and this person did have somewhat of a spiritual background and asked for a prayer. And so I grabbed this individual's hand, and I could feel stitches from the stab wounds. And we said a prayer, and her heart rate went up, and she started hyperventilating. And so we did something that I've seen you do, which is box breathing techniques and different things. Yep. And then the person this individual was able to just tell us what happened, talk about the smells and the horrific deep dive. We have a saying that I learned from Dr. Stephen Nicholas from Living Ideations, an amazing clinician, but something really powerful within suicide prevention is living ideations. It's flipping it to the positive side, and that's a whole nother conversation. But he talks about in that book, embracing the suck. And I love that because we got to let them get it all out, right? And just dig a little deeper and ask more questions when appropriate after making some statements. And so this individual was able to get it all out. And it felt so relieving to this individual. And that's just sitting there. There was a time after that for almost 5 minutes that we all sat there silent. And you could just feel the weight being off our shoulders, and all of us being present. That was the ministry of presence. And we actually were able to help that individual do some death notifications that she didn't have the courage to do because there was so much pain. And that person was able to rest and sleep after that. And so that's a powerful example of just the ministry of presence, and sometimes just being a really good listener and a safe, trusted listener.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, using the word presence in another way, like the presence that you bring with you, the energy that you bring with you is just,
the light, right? We all say, there's light.
Yep.
And we're doing things that care for other people. That being the light, being the change, it's so critical. And it matters, especially when you're volunteering your time. Though, I have part of my profession is paid through hospice, but I will say when there's times I've seen you volunteer your time for different support groups and things. And so, but when you're volunteering, there's something so powerful to the person you're serving that you're there, you're not financially gaining, you're there because you want to be. Yeah. And so like with our first responders, I know it means a lot to them that we really care about them. They see some of the worst things almost every day. And, the best way that we can invest in our community is to invest in them and our healthcare workers because they touch the community. They touch all of us, in a sense.
Supporting the supporters. It's really, really important
Yes.
for
We
sure.
have a tagline that is serve those who serve.
There you
And
are.
that's what we love. So
Yep.
either way, support the supporters, or as Mr. Rogers would say, when it's really dark, look for the helpers. I
There you
love
go.
that because
There you go.
that always will, we can always find gratitude for those who want to help and the good people. There's a lot of good despite the darkness. A
There
lot of
really, really is. Yeah, I agree with you there. Absolutely. So you've shared a lot with us. I want to kind of circle back a little bit. Your very first hospice patient, and maybe an introduction to Circle of Life Hospice, was your grandmother.
yeah,
Your father was already working with Circle of Life Hospice. Did I hear that right?
that's correct. Yeah, he had been working there for 2 years. He had been a pastor early on in his life and did a bunch of different things. And so when he got that role, I came 2 years after.
Got you. Okay. Okay. And I haven't had the honor or the pleasure to meet your father yet, but I'll tell you, I've heard stories of him from a few people. I cannot wait to make his acquaintance. So I'll just let you know, I'll drop that little bug in your ear. Um, but let's talk about Circle of Life Hospice and your work with them. And yeah, what is all of that? Tell us about it.
So, Circle Life Hospice is such a beautiful organization. There are many, many hospices in our local area and in Nevada.
Mhm.
But the bottom line for Circle Life Hospice is that it's not profit. In fact, it's not always profitable for Michelle, but she has such a big heart. She doesn't ration care. And so, for people that don't know a lot about hospice, you're given certain rights, but there's things that other hospices will do that go far beyond what the corporate hospices can and will do because of cost. And so, we are the second oldest hospice here in Northern Nevada. The first one was St. Mary's before it sold, and the second one was Circle of Life. And so it's a locally owned hospice agency since 1999. And the founder, Deb Gerard, just had a beautiful way of thinking about serving and loving and nurturing and caring for the whole circumference of care, spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical, not just physical and mental. And so she really thought out of the box. And then Michelle came along, the current owner, CEO, and administrator, and she carried on that vision and even took it to a whole new level with the hospice guest house. And so Circle Life Hospice is just a really special hospice agency that will always be near and dear to my heart. They do tons of stuff for the community, events for free, like the remembrance candlelight ceremonies that we used to have at the Believe sign that will be actually this year. It's going to be at the Sparks Marina on September 17th. We have a few hundred people come typically, and there is parking this time. You can bring a chair. And we just remember our loved ones together, despite no matter what the loss is, because we never understand fully each other's loss, and we're not walking directly in each other's shoes, but we do have the common, unfortunately, the common factor of grief. And so to be able to have resources there to honor all of our loved ones as a community and to find that unity, all the different walks of life. So it's little things like that that Circle of Life Hospice does, the free grief support groups for the entire community. There's not all hospices do that. In fact, very few do. And so, it was built on an idea of just really caring for the needs and doing what is right and the right thing. And so that has given me such a great foundation for understanding what that means in the life to really just love and go above and beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And all of the things that, yeah, Circle of Life provides. Amazing. You've mentioned too, I've heard you say that hospice isn't about dying, it's about living. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, so, hospice, again, like you said, is not about dying.
Yeah.
And there's this really bad stigma. In fact, we do something called a Death Cafe, which is an international movement. And we do it probably quarterly or every 6 months. We're going to have one in, I think, October 16th this year. You can find the info at colhospice.com. But it's a giant tea party. And we follow the model. And basically, just community members get together and they talk about cultural differences of death and those taboo subjects. And you would be shocked about how many people are scared of hospice. Like it's going to cause you to die quicker, right? And so it's just to get the elephant out of the room. But back to hospice, they actually did a study at the Huntsman's Research Institute, Huntsman's Cancer Research Institute, and they took three diagnoses and they studied if you were on for at least 3 months or more with those, you lived an average of 23 days more on average. And so it actually can not prolong life, but it can stabilize you with the medical care coming into your home and the right medications and professionals that specialize in end of life because so many doctors and nurses and God bless them, they're trained to save lives. And so it's really hard to accept and specialize in end of life. But there are such practices that make the person comfortable and really have value at the end of life to make the most. So, for example, when people are ready to stop curative treatments and to seek that comfort, one of the number one regrets I get on people's deathbeds is I wish I knew about this sooner, or from the family members or caregivers, or I wish I had gotten my loved one on hospice sooner because of all the support. If you wait till the last few days of life, you're really not going to be able to take advantage of that. The average diagnosis is it could be terminal in 6 months or less, but some people, as long as they meet the Medicare decline and it's documented, can be on for years. But the average, I would say, is probably 30 days. Because people are scared of it. So just ensuring that people understand the gift of hospice, which comes from the word hospitality. It really is that hospitality and just catering and meeting the needs that you're going to have in the life so that you can live whatever time remains with your family or with yourself to have meaning and value and quality and comfort and dignity.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just share a little personal experience I had when I lost my father. He was on hospice at two different times in his life because he had dementia, and sometimes with dementia,
Mm.
you get a little bit better, and he was taken off of hospice after a little bit. But so I got to see the level of support, the level of care he received while on hospice, and then when that was removed, it was, and then when he was put back on hospice, there was such a mix, right? A mix of, I was like so grateful for the help but also the realization that, okay, that, we are getting closer to the end here, but gosh, yeah, I'm so grateful personally for what hospice provides, right? And
Yeah.
he was on hospice in another state. Lived in Colorado, but yeah, it's just such a beautiful, helpful, comforting thing to have.
We call it graduating when they graduate, but
Graduated.
you actually called something out. Because a lot of times, then they'll come back and they'll suddenly decline because they're not getting that care.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and I just want to give you my condolences. That dementia is such a tough situation.
It
I
was
do
brutal.
some work with Alzheimer's Association
Mhm.
for their walk committee, and that is really difficult as a loss because you lose a person twice, and
Oh,
so
yeah,
you're grieving them twice, right? The person that you knew and then physically, and
yeah.
so my heart goes out and aches for you for that. That's tough.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And yeah, it was quite an experience. It was brutal for my family, but it again though the seeing the amount of people who are willing to just give and serve and share, and yeah, that was an amazing part of that.
The
So,
stories that we get, we call ourselves story catchers. You
uh,
know,
yeah.
the advice I give people to, even loved ones, is ask them about their stories about their lives that they may have not told you. And
Hmm.
just something, just there's a blessing that happens when people start to share those stories. It usually ends up in laughs, and some funny stories come up. It
Yeah,
makes the mood lighter, but also it brings value to that person's life because you're helping them process. And
yeah,
so anybody can do that, and that's an important thing. And the last hearing or the last sense to go is hearing. And so just, being able to touch and their hand if they like that, and let them know that they're not alone. Talking to them. Don't be afraid to talk to them, even if they're comatose. I'll tell a quick story. One time, actually, it was Chaplain Jesse. We were both praying for this comatose patient who was of faith. And so the family wanted prayer. And so she had been down for days and we prayed for her. And I kid you not, she came out of her comatose state, sat up and said, "Thank you so much for praying for me." And then she went right back down into her coma and she ended up dying sometime later. But it put the hairs on the back of my neck stuck up because it made me realize this is not a joke. They are listening. They are, I don't know how it happens besides the hearing, but the spiritual sense, they are aware of who's around them and what's taking place.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that does give me the tinglies as well. Goodness. And that leads into my kind of next area that I want to pull out of you a little bit. The title of this episode, Gifts of the Dying. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are those gifts?
That's a hard thing to summarize. I think the first one is the gratitude, realizing the simple things that we take for granted. I mean, I know I don't want to be too graphic, but even going to the restroom, right?
Mhm.
We take that for granted. It's more of an inconvenience. Oh, I got to go. I want to go on the next ride to Disneyland, but I have to go use the bathroom.
Yeah.
When you're dying, though, and that relief after you go to the bathroom, when your body starts to shut down naturally, that's going to stop, and you're not going to be able to go to the bathroom. Whether you'll become incontinent of bowel and bladder a
Mhm.
lot of times, and so it's those little things, those reminders of, man, the breath in my lungs and me living today in decent health and being able to do those little things, like eat my favorite meal, to not be in pain, to be able to spend time with my family. That really brings a lot of gratitude. And even, I deal with it on a daily basis. I still find myself in this chaotic world being ungrateful all throughout the day. It is such a challenge. And so being able to practice gratitude,
Yeah.
these gifts of the dying, that's one of them, is the gratitude. Another one is kind of the reverse analogy of, the big things become small things and the small things become big things. People on their deathbed do not tell me, I wish I had gotten this award, or I wish I had gotten promoted to this position. I wish I had more money in the bank or a bigger house. No, it's little things like, I wish I went to my daughter's baseball games. I wish I had taken the time to go help others. I wish I had blessed my family while I was alive. And so those are the small gifts of the dying that really, they can help us to live our best lives. And so, whether someone's helping others through grief, or volunteering at a hospice, or working in hospice, or at a hospital, or a first responder, or any of us, we can all find gratitude in those little things. And those are the gifts of the dying that our loved ones can teach us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And it sounds like you've got probably some really inspirational things that you've heard from people as they're, you've told a couple of stories, but what are some of those things that people have told you specifically, in their last moments?
You know, it, not one size shoe fits all. And obviously, death is such a personal thing.
Yeah.
You know, the next one closest to it is birth. It's such a special beginning of life.
Yep.
But death is even more personal because a lot of times you pick who's around you, most of the time, and so you're choosing who you're leaving this world with. You couldn't really choose who you came into this world with. And so you're a little bit more aware a lot of times of what's going on. And so I think that what comes to mind is a special individual who I became really close with. And this person at first didn't really, kept asking questions like, why am I still here? You know?
Mm.
And so I started spending time with this individual and really built a close relationship. And this person became like a piece of my family. I mean, I love this patient and individual. And as we got through it and the different events of her life, she shared about how much she wanted to be around. She started to get living ideations and wanted to keep fighting to be around to pray for her granddaughters and these other individuals. And I got a call on New Year's Eve, and there was a fire, and this individual had oxygen tanks explode, had to be dragged out almost naked from the apartment. And so, there's probably 70 to 80% burns on this individual's body.
Mm.
And so they gave her the option at the hospital do you want to, you know, just go on comfort measures and let go, or do you want to fight? And in that much pain, she had the wherewithal to say, I want to keep fighting. And so
Mm.
she actually was flown down to UC Davis and, um, just kept fighting. And I had to say goodbye on the phone. But it reminded me that, we shouldn't take living for granted each day. We really shouldn't, because when we get to the end, we're gonna probably have regrets like most people do, and want to fix those regrets or want to continue living another day. And so, that was one of the most profound things that I could think of off the top of my head. Just the fact that I want to live, and how much we are, stressing about the little things when we get to live. We get to go out there and spread love and be light and be the change and help others, find their purpose and find value in themselves. And man, we're designed to love others, and to be able to give back. There's something so powerful. Even in grief, I talk about it when they're ready to find an avenue to give back, because though it doesn't bring your loved one back, it doesn't fix everything. It definitely helps to be able to have a purpose. And even helping each other in the grief support groups that we facilitate, we learn so much from each other's sharings and different experiences. But there's also value in us sharing and seeing that it helps someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the circle that keeps on giving, like circle of life. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. So why do you think that we forget so often what really matters? What is that?
I wish I had the answer. I think that, especially, I'm sure it's been an issue with human history since
Yeah.
Adam and Eve, but I think that, in this chaotic world, especially now with technology, we're
Mm,
not present. And so,
right.
back to the presence, we have to slow down and really be present to really get all of, the benefits out of how great this life can be despite the trials.
Yep.
And, it's so important to look for that light despite the darkness. And something that, I think it was Tutu that talked about, I'm trying to remember the quote, but the darker the darkness, the brighter our light shines, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's so true. The greater the darkness, the greater the opportunity for a light to shine. Because if I shine my flashlight right now in this room, it's not going to be very bright. If I turn that light out and it's extremely dark and I turn that flashlight on, boom, it's illuminated. And so
Yeah.
we have the opportunity during challenging times. And I think that, especially in America, stigma, I'll just say transparently, is that we are so materially focused and so blessed. I think we forget what other countries go through. I think that we are so focused on material items that we forget that what matters at the end of the day is relationships. It's giving others. We look back and see, what did we contribute to those who can't contribute anything to us? What impact do we make? And it's not just time or finances, or being involved. It's all of it. And so I think it's important for all of us to give back, to find that purpose, pain into purpose.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And let's talk just briefly about, all of these things that you've just had the honor to witness, right? And stories that you've seen, lessons that you've been able to see. How has that changed the way you live your life?
Yeah. Um, I find myself, I serving a lot, and giving back and being part of so many amazing organizations, because I truly have found the benefit selfishly of what that does for me. And it helps me prioritize. When we are looking at other people's pain, it takes our vision off of our own pain. It's
100%.
still there, it's still heavy, it still hurts, but there's something to be said when we are looking at someone else and trying to help them, that somehow that love comes back to us. And so I find myself serving more and less attached to material things. I found myself taking the time to literally, as the cliche saying is, stop and smell the flowers. There are times I'll be walking up to a patient's house and I will take time to literally stop and smell the flowers and just take in the moment that, thank you, Lord, for the breath in my lungs, and just practicing gratitude. We have gratitude jars, Lily and I do, that we open up. It's a new tradition that we've done for the last few years on New Year's Day. And so, we put one or two things in there a week of what we're grateful for. And we write those down, fold it up, and put it in there. And then we review it at the beginning of the next year to remember all those things that we're grateful for. So I find myself putting those practices in place. And then I find myself, despite the sadness, I don't know how to explain this other than when you're near broken people. For me and my faith, and everybody has their own beliefs, there's a verse that is actually my chaplaincy verse on the faith side. That's Psalms 34:18. The Lord is near the brokenhearted, and He rescues those who are crushed in spirit. And for me, I feel God so near those broken people and loving them. I can feel his presence. And so, however people want to take that, just the humanitarian aspect of love and the human connection, there's something so powerful and fulfilling. I may be exhausted. I may come home and do something like a off shift ritual, and I may, let myself cry and take some moments and maybe really hating the world at times. But then when I put my head on my pillow, and I find myself really feeling fulfilled. At least I'm making a difference or trying to, and loving other people, and being out there, just being a light.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And you mentioned something there, your off-ship ritual.
Yeah. So something we teach to healthcare workers and first responders during the CISM or critical incident stress management debriefings. We do a piece on education during the national model. And one thing I always encourage them to do is something called an off-shift ritual. So everybody's heard probably that, it takes 21 days to start a new habit, or 21 times to get that. What's actually happening is you're rewiring your brain. There's actually a physical chemical change that is taking place. And so it's really hard to go out in the world and see some of these things or hear secondhand trauma through grief support groups or through the first responders systems, or hearing it directly from the patients in their ICU beds. And for some of that to not be residual and sticky to come home. And so I found myself, my Corps commander, Chaplain Misty Reed, she's an amazing individual. She started the Truckee Meadows Fire Department chaplaincy probably 12 years before we even had a chaplain corps. She's been a great mentor. We say every chaplain needs a chaplain. But she looked at me, and she was a first responder and then also a healthcare worker before that. Now she's a mental health clinician besides being a chaplain. And she said, being numb is just as dangerous. And I didn't understand that at the time, what that meant, because we always try to be tough and not show emotion and not think about those ugly things because we don't want to face them. But when you become numb, it builds up, and that's when things like thoughts of suicide or further things can really start to be more prevalent. And so I think that just being vulnerable, there's so much strength and vulnerability, and being able to talk about stuff through peer support, which we can talk about a little bit later, or SISMs. But for me, I found myself coming home and getting frustrated with my daughter, just irritable, stuff that I normally would not be with my daughter.
Yeah.
And so, we do an education piece on trauma responses. And some of those responses are like that, or loss of sleep, or not losing our appetite, right? There's a ton of them. And so I started noticing I was doing that. And then some different chaplains and first responders, recommended an off-shift ritual. I was like, what is that? So really, it's going to be different for everybody. But whenever you come home, and this can work for anybody, and you get off work or off your shift, you want to have a pattern, a ritual that you do exactly when you get home. For some people, that's sitting in the car for 5 minutes with no music, just to process, or they call it a BS friend. And I won't say the acronym for BS, but someone you can just call and tell everything to about how the day was going. Sometimes it's taking a walk with your dog around the block, before, grabbing your dog, but not going inside the house, putting your stuff down, and just going for a walk, right? For me, because I smell a lot of yucky smells sometimes through hospice and in the hospitals, the trauma toxicity of smells can be very strong, and how it goes into our muscle memory and our thoughts and the chemical imbalances. And so for me, to calm myself down, I love cinnamon candles. So my off-shift ritual is I come inside and I take my boots off and my gear and my name tag, and put my keys down, and I go and I light the cinnamon candle. And then I grab I got a little prop, my St. Pellegrino, my bubbly water, and I take some sips of that, and then I make tea.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a little bit of ginger crystals in it and some ginseng, and it's anxiety tea. And I just sit there and I process for 5 minutes, smelling that candle now because I've done it so much, and having a sip of that St. Pellegrino and then some tea. It's rewired my brain to let me know that, okay, you're home, you're safe. Whatever was back with you on shift or during those calls is done. You're now home. You're disconnected. And so that compassion, that pain that you internalize, it no longer. Now I can rest. And so, even with like law enforcement officers, they're the adrenaline, they're always on it up here. And so when they get home, they can't get back down to normal baseline. And so off-shift rituals will help them a little bit if they continue to do it over time and find outlets to be able to come back down to baseline. And that's true of us all.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. And that kind of choice to be vulnerable, right?
Mm.
Instead of shutting down, instead of going numb, that choice to say, okay, I'm not stuffing this. I'm processing it at the end of the night, right? And doing this. That how beautiful is that, right, for you? And maybe you can share a little bit more about that. And tell us really how are you doing and how has that helped you be who you are through all of this?
Well, I think mental health days are important.
Yeah.
I had a really one of the worst losses I've ever had a few weeks ago, and my administrator Michelle said, "Why don't you take the day off after that?" And I did. I let Lily take mental health days from school. She gets great grades. If she
Mhm.
tells me, "Dad, I need a mental health day," I let her stay home. We have to teach our kids the right behaviors and not just tell them, but show them. And so when I feel myself getting amped up or I need time to process, because it's confidentiality, because of that, just like a therapist, a chaplain can speak with another chaplain to get support. So I have chaplains, I have clinicians that I go to talk about things. And I'm not going to lie to you, there are things that I still struggle with from years ago. Really tragic events, whether it's children sex abuse that has been shared, or things, murders or suicides, and just really heartbreaking situations that stick with me. That's always going to be a part of us. But it's how do we properly channel that in a healthy manner and be able to let that out. So I think trauma and grief are kind of the same. Uh, Trauma is trauma until it becomes grief. And
Mhm.
so with trauma, we have to face it. It's really uncomfortable. And then once we face it and with the proper protections and support in place, we're able to move on to grieving. Because regardless, there's a loss there. Whatever, it may not be our loved one, but there is a loss. There's a loss of innocence. There's a loss of, what the other people lost that we internalized. And so with grief, it's really important. Grief is really just love with no place to go. And so, a lot of my individuals that I support, through the grieving process, that's why Circle of Life Hospice and Circle Life Hospice Foundation do so many different kinds of events that are remembrance, because we love that loved one, they're gone. It feels unnatural. Death sucks. It's horrible, right? It's one of the worst things. It separates us from them, depending on your beliefs, either forever or temporarily.
Yeah.
But it still sucks for the person that's left behind. And so to be able to recognize that and still love that person and do activities to remember and honor them gives us a place to open the valve and let the pressure down, right? And so we're not exploding at some point. And so that's really important. And I think that I've had to put that into practice, be vulnerable. That's why I'm willing to talk about it. And I'm not afraid to even. This is kind of some social workers or chaplains might disagree with this, and that's okay. I don't start crying, profusely in grief support groups, but I do at times share about my losses so they know I can relate in different aspects,
Yeah.
because we all need grief support. We all need to be vulnerable with each other. And there is power in that. I mean, there is true power in vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I cry in front of my clients. I mean, I don't, but
Yeah, and
yeah, it's important. It's,
it is
it's
important
to
to let them know
to
you
be
care and
genuine.
to be human, right? I mean, we're all human.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
okay to not be okay.
That's right. That's right. And I love this perspective too. Like there are healthy ways to move through this, right? Honoring grief and moving through grief in healthy ways, right? You said what grief is love with no place to go. Let's talk about that and this a healthy way to grieve so we have somewhere that love has somewhere to go.
Absolutely. So I think that, simple things that may sound silly, but if you have a loved one that you didn't get to say the things you wanted to say that you're regretting,
Yeah.
obviously you can't bring them back at this time and talk to them. I encourage people to do something called a message in a bottle. We do this activity and workshop where we get these bottles that light up and we put sand in it, and people write letters to their loved ones saying all the private or open things.
Mhm.
And they put that in the bottle, and we have some different things that we have them add in that signify or are symbolic essentially for different things in their life. But being able to write that letter, there's also the practice safely of getting the flame paper, writing a letter, and then lighting it on fire and watching it go up, to the sky. So being able to verbalize, whether in written form or speaking on a telephone, the things that you want to say, I think that's healthy. Talking about it with other people. Another thing is maybe setting a place at the table for them, even though they're not there and making their favorite meal, and just enjoying that meal, thinking about how you used to share that meal with them and honoring them with those memories. I used to have this thing in this very house where I would get kind of depressed and thinking about my grandma and that loss. Especially when you still live in the house, it's bittersweet because you have all the memories that you don't want to let go of, but it also reminds you everywhere you look. And so I used to just fight it, and I don't anymore. If I feel that wave of grief coming on and I start thinking about her, I will literally walk to every room and think of the memories in those rooms of her and just take, 20 minutes to process and think about those memories and honor them. And I feel so much better afterwards. Where before I would try to fight it and it would be, for a few days that I would be stuck in this rut. And so I think that, lighting candles and blowing a candle out for them and just, going to grief support groups. I think that it's not one combination for everybody, but it is a combination of maybe a mental health clinician, a chaplain, and a grief support group, a trauma therapist, or a person who specializes in trauma recovery. One size shoe doesn't fit all, but it's the combination of community support that we surround ourselves with that really makes a difference in the long run.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, and that does honor individual people's needs. What is the right mix for you, and what needs do you have? There are resources for that, and ways that you can heal. So, yeah, yeah. So, I have a few more questions for you,
Okay,
Chaz. I'm going to hang on to you as long as
that's
I can.
okay.
That's
Yep,
okay.
yep. Let's see it through.
Yeah,
Fire
you
away.
have so many good things to offer us. I want to ask a question, the time that you've spent with folks at the end of their lives, there are lessons there, obviously. What are some of the what are some of the lessons? What are some of the things that the dying have taught you really about living?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh, Forgive quick
Mm,
and love quicker. It's okay to put up boundaries, healthy boundaries, but forgive the person and move forward. Because that bitterness at the end of life can cause so much pain and suffering and spiritual distress to you as an individual. Take the trips that you need to take. You want to take. My grandpa worked as a carpenter, and I wasn't very close to this grandpa. It was my mom's dad, and he wasn't always the best grandpa. But one gift of the dying that I learned from him is he worked as a carpenter for the school district, and he almost never took a sick day. And back then, they let you keep your PTO, and they would pay it out.
mm,
And so he never took the trips with my step grandma. He never went on vacation. And all of a sudden, at the end of his career, he retires, and not 6 months later, he gets Bulgarian's disease and dies. He didn't get to spend that money, and it was all wasted in the sense that he could have been taking those trips and making those memories. And so that reminded me, it's worth the cost to go camping with your family or go to the ocean and spend time with your feet in the sand. Um,
yeah.
go say the things, even if they're uncomfortable, that you want to say. Another thing is talk about the end of life with your family and your wishes. Get an advance directive. If you're terminally sick, get a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. Talk about DNRs. I've had individuals who were DNR or do not resuscitate. And typically elderly, when they do that, it's such a small chance. There's usually brain damage if they are recovered, and usually, it fractures their chest a lot of times. And so if you are a DNR, also talk about that with your family, because sometimes our families will freak out if they don't know our wishes. And it's happened where a young paramedic didn't listen or with the pulse on the fridge and ended up resuscitating the individual. And so, talking about the wishes, I know it's uncomfortable, but what's ironic is when you get to the end of life and it's already all figured out, there is so much peace, and that is such a gift for your family to have it all figured out. And so, time and time again, we always laugh about family dynamics in hospice and all over the place in times of crisis. But, you know, just have those conversations now, get them out of the way, start planning, and just be able to tell your loved ones that you love them. Even if you're tired, make that phone call, send that text. Um, Sometimes when it comes to suicide, you can do everything possible, love them, give them all the resources. That's ultimately their decision, and we don't have the power to stop them in that aspect. And sometimes that happened with a man I was caring for over a year. And on my birthday this year, and that was a hard loss. I got a call from the ME's office, and I was the only person this gentleman had. He had called me the night before. He had been going through a lot of different terminal diagnoses, and he was done fighting and was going to have comfort on end of life care. And I gave that man everything. I used all my training. I saw no signs. He was excited. There was comfort in the fact that he would be out of pain soon. But be able to die with dignity, essentially. And then I got a call on my birthday from the ME's office that the individual had hung himself, and that broke my heart. But I know now that he just wanted to thank me basically and let me know he appreciated me for investing in him. No one cared for. He had no relatives here, and to get his dialysis, he needed someone to sign him out and take care of him afterwards. And so a community person had called me, and so I went and took liability for him and would sign him out of these surgeries, take care of him, and so that he could continue living, because otherwise the hospital wouldn't perform those measures. And I know I did everything in my power that I'm aware of to help that individual. I had a neighbor who I could have loved and been a better neighbor. I tried to help this individual. There was some mental health things, and the individual ended up doing murder-suicide by cop. And afterwards, I thought, I could have had more conversations with that gentleman. I kept my distance, but still tried to help him from a distance. But there were times that I reflected upon that I could have loved him more. And so I guess I'm just trying to wrap this up, that it's important to be, those are gifts from the dying that, if you're on the other side of it and a loved one completed suicide, and you really feel you did everything, ultimately that was their decision. And a therapist taught me that a long time ago when I was 15 and had a loved one attempt suicide severely. But on the other side of it, we can all love our neighbors a little bit more. And you never know, holding a door open and smiling to somebody. I'll share this really quick on the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge. There's a gentleman who survived jumping off the bridge, and he broke every bone in his body. It's truly a miracle. It's like a 1 in a million shot. And that individual is actually a speaker, and he talks about as soon as he jumped off, he regretted it. Mm. And he sat there on that bridge, and he had said, if one person stops me to ask me how my day is going, mind you, hundreds of people all day long passed him by. If one person stopped and said, how are you doing today? He had said to himself, he wouldn't complete suicide or jump off the bridge. And so that is a powerful reminder from the dying, and a few people who have made it, that, kindness matters. Kindness makes a difference. And just loving people within our means with boundaries, we asking how people are doing and checking in on our friends and family, we can all do that and make a difference.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I'll tell you what's coming up for me through these stories, for those who have lost someone to suicide, who are saying those same things to themselves, oh, I should have, or I could have, or why didn't I? Mm. To hear someone who, you are an absolute inspiration to me all the time. Every time I see you, it's, you really are. And to hear you, like, those kinds of thoughts and questions come up even for you, where I know, like, there's not a person alive that could have given more, that could have helped in any kind of a better way or whatever, those thoughts that come up for us, that it is their choice in that really horrible situation. And because I know that losing someone in that way can be just so,
Horrific.
well,
Oh my goodness.
horrific. Yeah. Yeah. Clinically, the word comes up for me like dysregulating, but yes,
Yeah.
absolute horror. Right. And so, just I appreciate you for being so open and honest and vulnerable about that.
Just giving back.
Yeah.
We're part of organizations that you're aware of, like American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Um, and there's a bunch of them, but get involved. If you've gone through that loss, find a suicide survivors group so you can relate to similar losses. But also, I found healing in just continuing to try to help other people through those losses. And sometimes there's wins. Sometimes there are wins. I've had people say, though they save themselves. That's the truth. I had a lady who told me if I hadn't called when I did, and it had been months since I had provided support to her, that she would have completed suicide. She had the means and everything. And just because I called and checked on her, she decided not to. That individual is still alive today, but we can all make a difference. And it takes the village. And we are all, you don't have to be a social worker or a chaplain or a therapist or clinician. Everybody can make a difference and we can all give the light.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I am at this point, if anyone who's watching live or listening live, if you have questions, please do use the Q&A box or even the chat box if you can't find the Q&A box. And go ahead and put your questions in there, your comments for our Chaplain Chaz here. And in the meantime, Chaz, if you can offer just a couple of words for those who are feeling right now just lost or disconnected. Yeah, what would you say to them right now?
Just say that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Though we can't, completely understand what you're going through. Know there are people that care. Please reach out
Mhm.
to myself or Jolene. You can, reach out to the Great Basin Chaplain Corps or Circle Life Hospice or any of those organizations we talked about, and just connect and find some purpose. We all have passions. Find how you can give back because there is power in the power of giving and having gratitude and seeing others suffering. There's meaning from that pain into purpose, and just know that there are people like us that love you and care.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Beautiful word. So I intend on putting links to, all the things that we've talked about, your contact information with your permission.
No,
Uh,
absolutely.
I'll put that in the show notes as well, but it also helps just to let people know verbally how can people learn more about or support the work being done by Great Basin Chaplain Corps and the Circle of Life Hospice Foundation or any other organizations as well.
Yeah. So our hospice foundation that does a lot of grief support work for free for the community. You can learn more at colhospice.com/foundation or just colhospice.com and click the foundation tab. We are looking to launch a grief support center called the Circle Life Grief and Trauma Resource Center, which hopefully, Jolene, you'll be a part of. And I think this is going to be huge to cover the gap areas in the community for different demographics and for just more grief support resources because so many things like addictions and things, they have all these roots. Sometimes trauma is talked about, but not enough, obviously. But the one thing that's usually missing is grief and the loss, and we're all grieving something. So you can learn more about that process and stay in touch with us on Facebook. GreatBasinChaplains.com is how you can learn about the Great Basin Chaplain Corps. And you can always reach out on social media for me for Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Nextdoor. And I will definitely respond to you. And then also my email, chaz@greatbasinchaplains.com. And just know again that we're both here for you guys if you're listening and struggling. And there is hope. There's always hope.
Yes. Yes. Oh, thank you, Chaz. I appreciate that. I am seeing one question here from Dottie. Thank you for sharing with all of us listeners. My cousin is struggling with the loss of her husband, and I came away with grief is love with no place to go. So I think Dottie will share that with her cousin. So thank you
Awesome.
for that, Chaz. Yeah.
And thank you, Dottie, for sharing that.
And so glad we can help. And I knew, I was so honored that you agreed to be on this show, Chaz, and share all of your wisdom. You're just such an inspiration. Thank you so
So,
much.
so are you, and it's an honor. It truly is an honor, and I thank you for the platform to just talk about these tough things, and to be open, and to let people know that we're all going through these different trials, and that we're not alone. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, is again being the light for each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for those who are watching or listening. Thank you for hanging out with us. All right. We'll see you soon, Chaz. We'll see
Take
you.
care.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Grapevine Wellness Show. If you found it helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. If you're struggling with trauma or grief, anxiety, depression, or if your relationship is struggling, maybe along with some of those things, I want you to know that there is a path forward, and you don't have to walk it alone. Visit grapevineinnerwellness.com to learn more about the work that I do and how we can work together. And I'll see you next time.